Good evening and welcome to BUGAJSKI Hour. I am happy to be back in Tirana to examine important global and local developments that affect the lives of all Albanians. Today we are focusing on the BUGAJSKI hot seat in a discussion with the leader of Albania's largest ethnic minority, the Greek community, who is also a parliamentary deputy for the Unity for Human Rights Party, Vangjel Dule. It is valuable, I believe, to discuss a range of questions regarding minority rights in Albania, as well as Greek-Albanian relations more broadly, given the spreading economic crisis in parts of the Balkan Peninsula and the impact these will have on Albania itself. And our guest today can help provide us with the local Greek perspective on some of these important issues. Vangjel Dule, leader of the Unity Party for Human Rights and a member of the Albanian Parliament. Welcome to the show and welcome to the BUGAJSKI hot seat.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
It's good to have you here. Let me begin with some clarification as to the Greek community here in Albania. You can tell me much more about, obviously, the state of the Greek community here, but who represents the Greek people here? Is it your party, or is it the recently formed mega party, or both? I mean, how would you describe the situation?
First of all, we must make it clear that on ethnic ground, the Greek ethnic minority is represented through the Democratic Union of the Greek ethnic minority, Omonia. Omonia was founded in January 1991 and took part in the first post-communist elections held in the country and got 5 out of the 250 seats of the then Albanian parliament.
I remember I was here at the time. I remember meeting with the Omonia leaders at the time. Yeah.
But after that, before the elections of 92, the two big parties, that is the Democratic and the Socialist Party, reached an agreement to amend the electoral law and to introduce a disposition that excluded Omonia from the electoral process, deprived Omonia from the right of taking part in the elections. Then, after that, the Greek ethnic minority members reacted. They collected the signatures according to the Albanian law in order to found a party. And by then we had the foundation of Human Rights Union Party. Human Rights Union Party got the approval from the Ministry of Justice just a couple of days before the deadline of entering the elections. It was under the constant pressure of the Council of Europe that they accepted the demand for the foundation of Human Rights Union Party. So, Human Rights Union Party took part in the elections of 92, representing the Greek ethnic minority members without being an ethnic ground political party. After that, it embraced even other social groups in the country, either minority groups or different individuals from the majority. Its pillars remain the Greek ethnic minority, the Vlachophone community, at the same time the members of Montenegrin and Serbian minority, and many other individuals from majority and minority groups. Today, Human Rights Union Party is spread all over the country. is represented in almost all the municipal and communal councils. It has its structures in almost every part of the country, while as far as the other party you mentioned, MEGA, it was founded just a couple of years ago. It debuted in the elections of 2011 without success. They ran against us, but they lost in all the entities that they ran in those elections.
So, but relations between your two parties, would you say, are good? I mean, what is the position?
You see, the story starts in 2009. We were in coalition with the government, with Mr. Berisha, from 2005 2009. But it was impossible for us to continue that cooperation. So when we made it clear to Mr. Berisha that we could not continue anymore being a part of his coalition, then he tried to persuade, and he was successful, to get the then Minister of Human Rights Union Party, Mr. Barca, and the prefect of Girocastra, Spiroxera, to run with him in the elections of 2009. One was elected, and after that, he did what he could in order to raise the structures of democratic party in the areas where the Greek ethnic minority members live. But he saw that he was not very successful in that. That may be because of his negative past in his relations with the Greek ethnic minority members during his presidency. That is, 92 to 97. We must not forget that he expelled the Greek Orthodox priest Chrysostomos Maidonis from Girocastra. He arrested the leadership of Omonia, and so on and so forth. So that counted too much in the relations of Mr. Berisha with the members of the Greek ethnic minority. So, seeing that it was impossible to have effective structures in the ranks of human rights of Greek ethnic minority members, he tried the other version, to create a second political party, which in fact was founded by his followers. So
you don't think this is an authentic
no,
Greek party?
It was not an authentic political movement. It was founded under the dictation of the Prime Minister. But now we are in dialogue with MEGA in order to achieve a common effort in the upcoming elections of 2013. I'm not sure of the result. It's underway, we hope.
You're trying to achieve a common platform or a coalition with MEGA?
You see, there are not so many differences in the platform because in as far as the rights of the Greek ethnic minority in the country, it is Omonia that has the first say in the demands and the estimation of the status and so on and so forth. So we hope there are all the premises to achieve such an agreement.
In terms, I want to go into the position of the Greek minority, the rights that they have, the rights that they demand in a moment. Let me ask you first, obviously with elections coming up here, as you mentioned, general elections at the end of June, everybody's looking very closely to see what coalitions are going to be formed. How flexible are you in terms of which coalition will you join? Or have you already made your mind up whether to join the Socialist coalition, Socialist-led coalition, or the Democratic-led coalition?
We have been clearly a very strong opposition voice in and outside the parliament during these 4 years. We think that this was a lost governmental mandate. It was a failure since its genesis. Let me explain why. The strategic objective of Mr. Berisha and his government, as it was stated in the parliament, was the European integration and the achievement of the status of a candidate country to EU. But we made it clear since the first session in the parliamentary debate, how are you going to achieve this strategic goal? You don't have the parliamentary arithmetics in your favor. You don't have the numbers. So, in the case that you don't have the numbers in the parliament, you have two ways. One is to ask the support of the opposition, at least to achieve this strategic goal. We know that over 85% of Albanians are in favor of that goal. They feel Europeans. Or in case you don't get the support of the opposition, and it was one of the chances, or one of the probabilities, and that was due to the fact that the government of Mr. Berisha violated the opposition. They were very rigid not to accept the fair demand of the opposition in favor of the transparency of the last elections, and that was crucial. And when you violate an opposition, you cannot at the same time ask their support. So, when you cannot achieve that goal, you have the other choice, to address the people and tell them, look, I cannot get the support of the opposition even in that strategic goal. So, I lead the country in fresh elections. He did none. He did not ask the support of the opposition. He did not address the people. So, we are the only country in the region to fail for the third successive year in getting the status of candidate country.
I want to come a little bit later to the EU question, because I think that's very, very important. But just to step back a little bit in terms of the upcoming elections.
May I add just...
Yes, sure, please.
You see that while we are very critical concerning the government, we are critical towards the opposition too.
This I was going to ask, actually, which way, yeah.
We have been pushing for a clear vision, a strategy and tactics. If the government is going normally to the end of this mandate, which is a failure, to a certain degree, it is due to the awkward politics followed by the opposition. If they were present in the parliament since the first day, if they did not follow the boycott for 6 or more months, if they combined a very strong presence in the parliament, a very strong and clear presence in the diplomatic residencies of the international community here and all over Europe and United States of America, and if they combined them with the strong people's always constructive and democratic protest, we would have shortened the life of the failed government. So that is the reason why we have been so critical towards the opposition too. Now, we have to choose. We know that the electoral system is an unfair one. And it is penalizing especially the small parties. Autonomous running in the elections is almost a suicide. So we have to take a decision to join the ranks of one or the other coalition.
What is it that either side would need to offer you, or what policies would they need to be pursuing for you to enter into a coalition with them?
We traditionally have been an open-minded party, and we have cooperated with both the Democrats and the Socialists. The only red lines for us are parties that do not share a European vision, and they are not in good favors with the rule of law, human dimension, human rights, and rights of minorities.
Which parties would you say fit that description?
It is clear that during the last years we had political parties founded on such basis and operating with such principles. We know that for the first time, after a lot of reports that evaluated the constructive attitude of Albania in favor of peace, cooperation and prosperity in the region, last year we heard a different bell tolling in Brussels, and that was against nationalism. And it is clear in the public opinion which these parties are. So we do not have any common ground with parties that are against the good, friendly neighborship with all the countries of the region.
I presume you mean the Red and Black Alliance.
Red and Black Alliance and PDIU and even separate politicians in the ranks of the two big parties. So it is a very complicated situation. And all the efforts underway aiming at achieving coalitions basically rely on technicalities. And this will be the big problem of tomorrow for the country. When you have coalitions which are not based on programs, alternatives, common goals, but they rely only on numbers, then you are destined not to be successive after the elections.
Does the Unity Party presumably you have a broader platform? You're not just focused on human rights and minority questions. You have an economic platform, a security platform, international platform. Could you say a few words about that?
Yes, of course. We have our platform on every aspect of the life of the country, starting from the economy to the foreign affairs, to the foreign policy, regional policy, the fiscal system, the health policy, the social policies, cultural policies, and so on and so forth. But we stick to our profile as human rights and minority rights supporters, because we see that there is a vacuum in the programs of other parties concerning these issues. I want to be clear. We think and support that Albania needs deep, all-inclusive reforms in three main aspects. First, it is the state of law. Second is a competitive economy. And the third is a coherent society. We are far from the European standards in these three directions. And if you would ask me what would be the first priority, we, the very next day, after the elections of the 23rd of June, we should start with the Constitution. The country needs a constitutional reform. It is now almost 15 years since it was voted, and it was amended overnight in 2008, and now, especially the amendments of 2008 that came as a joint initiative from SP and DP worked to the detriment of normality in the country. And to continue with human rights and rights of minorities, why do we insist? why do we pay so much attention to these aspects? In our country, you can be critical towards the government or the opposition or the state in almost all the aspects of the life of the country. You can be critical against the fiscal system. You can be critical against the social policies. But you are not tolerated if you speak in favor of human rights, and especially rights of minorities. Personally, during all these years of parliamentary and extra-parliamentary presence, I have found the support of many colleagues in many issues raised by Human Rights Union Party. The only issue I never got anyone's support was the rights of minorities.
Let's come to this in a moment in more detail. I just want some basic statistics to begin with. Can you tell us how big the Greek population is in Albania? Because I know there's some dispute over figures and demographic trends. How many Greeks are there now, and how many would you say have emigrated since the collapse of communism?
This is the most crucial issue. We have not solved. This is the root of the problem. Because if you don't know how many members of a certain minority you have in a certain country, if you don't know where they live, how can you draft adequate politics in order to guarantee a status of rights according to the European realities? In our country, we had the first declaration made in respect to the rights of minorities in 1924. Before Albania joining the League of Nations, it submitted a declaration that committed itself to respect a certain rights for the members of the minorities. And there were mentioned the regions where the members of the Greek minority in Albania live. After that, we had the famous, it is considered as a case study in bibliography of the rights of minorities, when the members of the Greek ethnic minority were obliged to address the High Tribunal of Hague in demand of their educational rights in 1936. And they got a positive decision from the tribunal. But in 1945 started a new and very negative period for the rights of the minorities. I will bring you just an example. In the first elections held in the country, the people of Himara voted in over 85% against the establishment of the communist regime. And then they suffer the repercussions of their decision. What was that? Exiles, people executed, the leaders, and many others imprisoned. Parallelly, their ethnic identity in the civil registries were replaced by the Albanian one arbitrarily and violently. The Greek school there was closed down. So, now, 22 years after the fall of communism, the majority of the people, and especially the politicians here, are very critical towards the policies of the communist regime. But the only thing that they think was done right by the communist regime was the respect of the rights of the Greek ethnic minority. This is an oxymoron. How can it be? They were under a double pressure. the first was the pressure as for all the other citizens of the country, and the second one was the ethnic pressure. They could not communicate with their nation. They were isolated. But now, despite of our continuous efforts, we have not the rights of the Greek ethnic minority in Himara region recognized, for example. They were recognized in 1924. They are not recognized today, 2013. So this is the reason why we are very insistive in these aspects. Now, what about the numbers? The communist regime said that there were around 57,000 Greeks living in Albania. And they recognized an elementary status of rights in an arbitrarily defined geographical area of 99 villages. If you are living within this jurisdiction, you are recognized the right of having your ethnic background recognized in the civil registry, follow the elementary school in your mother tongue parallel with the teaching of the Albanian official language, and talk in public in your mother tongue. If you are, for one or the other reason, leaving this area, you are automatically losing all your rights. Now, what happened after 1990? We demanded that a free, democratic census, according to the European Council standards, be carried even in Albania. They refused to fulfill our demand in the first census carried in 2001, evoking technical reasons. We insisted in all the international fora, and we have the reports of the Commission of European Union, the Council of Europe, the State Department, demanding a census be carried according to these standards. And after all that, the Albanian government promised that in the census of 2011, all these demands would be fulfilled. And in fact, until the end of 2010, according to the report submitted by the Albanian government to the Council of Europe, they promised that the census was going to be carried according to the before mentioned standards. And the census was going to be carried in April 2011. Out of a sudden, 2 months before, that is February, the government said that it was impossible to carry the census because the period coincided with the pre-electoral campaign period in the country.
So what do you think the real reason was?
The real reason was that there was pressure from many sides in the government not to carry a census according to the European standards. And that came true some months ago, some months later.
But why? Why would they not implement a census according to European standards?
Because a census carried according to the standards of the European Council would show the true dimensions of the Greek ethnic minority, their presence, and there are circles in the country not interested in that truth. And in July 2011, just a couple of months before the census was carried, we had 3 amendments proposed by PDIU MPs. They aimed, and definitely realized, to abrogate the disposition that guaranteed the right of self-identification. Second, they penalized all those citizens that declared freely their ethnic background. And third, they violated the privacy of personal data. Because if you are penalized administratively with a fine of $1,000, then a reason must be mentioned. And by mentioning a reason, that means making public data that must be protected according to the international and European law. So the census was carried under the amendment of the law. We had the presence of a delegation of the Council of Europe in the country. They mentioned it clearly in the presence of the then Minister of Foreign Affairs that the right of self-identification is an inalienable right for every European citizen in all the countries of jurisdiction of the Council of Europe.
We will break now for some ads. What precisely would it mean on a census, self-identification? In other words, that you could not write in your ethnicity?
Ethnicity. Specifically ethnicity. Because, and we had, after that, we had the reaction of all the minority groups in the country. They plead to have a dialogue carried between them and the government. They received no response. They sent petitions to the government, still no response. And definitely they were obliged to take the decision to make an appeal to their members not to attend the census. So the members of the minorities, of all the minorities in the country, boycotted that census. And after that, we had the ridiculous results, saying that in the country, for example, live 24,000 members of the Greek ethnic minority. For us, they are invalid. We do not recognize that census and its results.
Do the European representatives that were here and European institutions, do they recognize the census?
We have the report of the Council of Europe. That is the Directorate of the Framework Convention for the protection of the members of the national minorities that says clearly it was voted by the Council of Ministers of the Council of Europe in November 2011, and it was made public in June 2012. And it says clearly that the way the census was carried violated the Article 3 of the Framework Convention for the protection of the members of national minorities. And after that, we have the same story being repeated. We had a report from the Council of Europe. There is debate in our country after every report of every international organization on every issue. There was no debate at all. There was no media, electronic or written media, to make mention of the fact that a critical report was issued by the Council of Europe concerning the census. After that, we had the Democratic Union of the Greek ethnic minority carrying on its own registration, not the census, a registration of the members of the Greek ethnic minority. It ended in the end of January, and we are expecting the results by the end of summer. Mm-hmm. So we are going to have...
This would be an estimate of the number of
yes.
Greek
now,
people.
You made another question. How many of the members of the Greek minority live in Albania and how many of them have emigrated to Greece? It's very difficult to say in accurate numbers or percentages because there is a dynamic situation. There are people who certain periods of time live in Greece, work there, and in seasonal work, and the rest of the year they come back. And or the students, they study in Greece, they come during summertime in their birthplace. So it is a dynamic situation. But it is a fact that, as all over the country, the youth mainly have emigrated to Greece. They live there, they have their economies there, but at the same time they do restore and maintain their households in their birthplace. So this is the situation.
And
now.
they send money back, I presume.
They have the elders there, they send money back. Sometimes they leave their kids with the elders and so on and so forth.
So in terms of the survey that was done by Omonia, what would be the estimates? I mean, ballpark figure, as we say in America, of number of Greeks.
What can I say is that much more than what the official census says.
Much more meaning what, in double, treble?
Much more.
Much more?
Much more.
Okay, well, I'll wait to see, when will the result of this?
By the end of summer.
Okay, okay, well, we'll keep an eye on this actually to see. What has been the response of the government to Omonia conducting its own survey, its own census, if you like?
We had no reaction from the government. Omonia asked the government to offer technical support, and why not their presence in the overall process, but they received no answer from the government. The only authority that reacted was the Independent Authority for the Protection of Individual and Personal Data. And they had cooperation with Omonia in order to guarantee that we do not have violations of the personal data during the process.
Let's turn now to the position of the Greek minority. The minority rights, the human rights that you speak about, which areas in particular are you focused on that you think are insufficiently covered, insufficient minority rights? In which particular areas? Is it education? Is it culture? Is it publishing? Is it language use? Could you give us a sort of overview?
First of all, we must accept that in our legislation, almost all the conventions and agreements of the Council of Europe and OSCE have been ratified by the Albanian Parliament. So they are part of our domestic legislation, except of one convention, that is the Convention of the Council of Europe on the regional and minority languages. It has not been signed or ratified, and there is a kind of pressure from the Council of Europe to proceed even with that convention. But there is a really big gap between the legislation and its implementation. This is due to two main reasons, according to us: the lack of political will and the lack of the state or governmental instruments responsible for the implementation of these policies. As far as the second is concerned, we have the Minority Rights Committee, which is operating by the Prime Minister, but according even to the estimation of the Council of Europe, it's really a failure, because instead of playing the role of the ambassador of the minorities to the government, they play the opposite role. And the third aspect is the cultivation of a positive opinion concerning the rights of minorities. There, we can not mention even a single positive record in that aspect. And unfortunately, in the chronicles of these 22 years, a couple of years ago, we had the first murder based on ethnic hatred in Himara. Aristotelis Goumas was murdered because he was speaking his mother tongue, Greek. So, what are the main problems now? The main problems have to do first with the property status in the broader area where the Greek ethnic minority members live. To our opinion, we have a coordinated campaign where government, state, judicial system many times do work together against the property rights of members of the Greek ethnic minority, religious properties of the Orthodox Church, and community properties. They are more evident in the region of Himara and other seaside areas. The second most important issue is that of education. It is a fact that although the notion of the minority areas does not exist anymore in the legislation of the country, all the practices are based on that notion. We do not have a public Greek language school operating outside the so-called minority zones imposed during the communist regime.
These 99 towns,
yes,
villages, yeah.
With the exception of the 3 cities of Girokastra, Saranda, and Delvina. In Himara, although the international community, Council of Europe, OSCE say that there is a Greek community there, we are obliged to run a private school there. In Korcha, we have the same situation. While we have more than 600 students following the Greek school, we don't have a public one there. So we run a private Greek language school there. And
privately funded, in other words.
Privately funded. So even in Tirana, it is the same situation. The other aspect, which is very problematic, the texts of history, even in the areas where public schools in Greek language are operating, they are very problematic. Kids of 10 or 11 or 12 are many times obliged to learn and reproduce theories against their nation, Greek nation. And unfortunately, these problems are getting intensified each passing year.
Such as what? Can you give us an example?
Such as the Greeks have been always working against the territorial integrity of Albania, and Greeks have always wanted the worst for Albanians, and so on and so forth. So it is very problematic and very dangerous. How can we poison the conscience of these kids with such theories?
These are in secondary schools, in primary schools?
It starts from the second level of primary school, that is the 7th, 8th course, and so on and so forth. And they continue. It is very problematic even for the Albanian students. Just imagine how difficult it is for the Greek students. And the other issue is that they are not taught in the schools the history of the Greek nation. They are not taught the history of their community. They are not taught their culture and their civilization. And another aspect that we do face a lot of problems, it is the presence in the media. There is no presence of the Greek ethnic minority, culture, traditions, history, in the central electronic media, the state-run ones. We have only a broadcast in the local Girokastra TV in the Greek language, but that's not enough.
And newspapers, radio, is it the same situation?
The same situation. There is actually only one newspaper published by Omonia. So the situation is very difficult in that aspect. And so we can continue with the presence of the Greek ethnic minority members in the public administration, while we have been in very satisfactory percentages before 90s in every aspect of the life of the country, starting from the academic one to the military, security forces, diplomatic corps. Now, you can rarely find any diplomat of Greek ethnic origin. During the years 95, 96, the army was cleansed from almost every officer of Greek background, and this situation continues even today. And even in other aspects, even in other institutions, we don't have any member in the constitutional court of the country. There are very few in the other levels of the judicial system. So it is a very big problem. Prejudice and stereotype accompany every member of the Greek ethnic minority, especially if he aims at getting a position in the diplomatic corps, in the military, in the security forces, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. How would you answer charges of some people I've spoken to that the Greeks may demand some sort of special status in Albania, something along the lines of the Ohrid model in Macedonia, or even the Ahtisaari plan for the Serb minority in Kosovo? How would you respond to that?
Omonia is very clear. I made it clear before that Omonia is responsible for the framework of demands towards the Albanian authorities. And it has been clear since its foundation. Every demand of Omonia is based primarily now on the framework convention of the Council of Europe for the protection of the rights of the members of ethnic minority. How can it be against Albania, such a framework of demands? If you claim to be educated in your mother tongue, is it against somebody else? If you pretend to have your culture be taught in the school, is it against the other members of the society? Why shouldn't we follow the positive examples in other European states? Why not have, even in Albania, multicultural educational institutions of primary and secondary level, where students of different ethnic backgrounds study together, and alongside with their own history and culture and traditions, they learn the other one's history, culture, and traditions. If we want really to Europeanize our country, we must Europeanize it in its every cell.
You asked the question why. How would you answer it? Why isn't that the case?
It is...
Is there some sort of historical fear? Is it some sort of defensive nationalism? What is it exactly?
Let me first make mention of a special situation. The people that come from regions where they live side by side for centuries, and I mean Albanians, coming from areas where they have lived together with the Greeks, have no problems in seeing their Greek fellow citizens have their own schools, have their own cultural centers, have their own cultural activities.
That is usually the case throughout the region, actually, when people live together.
They don't have any problem. They are supportive. And I can mention you a really moving example. When the leadership of Omonia was imprisoned during 94, 95, there were many Albanians. I was living in Tirana, ethnic Albanians, coming to meet me and ask what the fate of the imprisoned leaders of Omonia would be. This is very positive. These are very strong positive biomas. We must spread. This is a very precious heritage. Now, the negative propaganda comes from individuals and circles that have had no relation with that multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multi-religious situation. And here we have to add another element. There are politicians and political parties that really invest their hopes and ambitions in cultivating the inter-ethnic, inter-religious hatred. For the first time, we have it in Albania in such an open and provocative way. Just imagine when a leader of a political party belonging to a different religious community has an opinion and expresses it in public in a demandative way, who will be the leader of another religious community to which he doesn't belong to? These are very negative phenomena introduced lately in our political life, and I feel really sorry that the two big parties many times are flirting with such politicians and such political parties for just a few votes. This is very problematic, and it is a major concern for us.
So do you think this nationalist rhetoric that occasionally creeps into the political debate, do you think this will escalate during the election campaign?
I think that the reaction of the international community, primarily United States and the European Union, was right on time. It is working now. And I hope that they will stop that dangerous escalation. Because if there is one that is damaged more than anybody else from such a rhetoric, is Albania itself. Because they have targeted what has been most precious for Albania: religious coexistence, harmony, inter-ethnic cooperation. We do not have the same situation in other Balkan countries with similar realities. We must not forget what happened in Bosnia, what happened in other areas. We have a multi-religious country. We have a multi-ethnic country. And the only modus vivendi is mutual respect.
We will break now for some ads. But do you think then there's a danger of inter-ethnic relations deteriorating, or interreligious relations deteriorating in Albania?
It is a honoring fact to the leadership, to the leaderships of all the religious communities that keep all these elements and all these influences outside their communities. That does them credit. But the same thing does not happen among the politicians. The politicians sometimes play with that dangerous fire. And it is the most dangerous fire that can exist in our region. So our position is very clear. Far from nationalistic rhetorics. They are hollow, they are empty, they are polarizing, they are very abusive. And is it worth for 10,000 more votes to sacrifice what you have inherited from your ancestors as most precious? I don't think so.
Let me turn now to a very important aspect in the region, and that's, I would say, the impact of the crisis in Greece on neighboring countries, particularly on Albania. As we know, Greece has gone through this dramatic financial, economic, social crisis, potentially political crisis, and it has had an impact in terms of growing unemployment, in terms of radicalization of the political scene in Greece. We have a radical left. We also have a radical right, a very chauvinistic party called Golden Dawn that gained almost 7% of the vote in the last elections in Greece. 18 parliamentary seats. Some figures I've seen that their support has actually been growing because the crisis is continuing. How does this rebound on relations, Greek relations with Albania, on the position of the Albanian minority in Greece. We know there are many Albanians that live in Greece, that work in Greece. Some have come home. Could you give us a sort of overview of the impact, in other words, economic, political, security of the Greek crisis?
It's unavoidable. The ties between the two countries are so close and multidimensional. First of all, we must know that Greece is the country of the origin of a large percentage of foreign investments in the country. It is the first foreign investor in Albania. It is the second partner in trade balance, and it is the first in as far as the remittances of emigrants.
Right.
So it is very clear that the Greek crisis has its influence in the economic aspect. The other aspect is that many analysts expected a tide of Albanian emigrants back to Albania. That has not proven to be true until now. We have only sporadic return of emigrants who lost their jobs under the effects of the Greek crisis. And that means a lot. That even in that difficult situation created in Greece, they prefer the Greek reality with all these consequences rather than the Albanian one. That is another argument that we have not done our job correctly in Albania. The third one is that if all these developments and the radicalization of the political life in some aspects in Greece have affected Albania, we have one very positive and very indicative sign. The official policy of Greece towards Albania has been the same, if not more friendly, more supportive for EU integration of Albania, although there have existed some serious problems in the past. That means that despite the difficulties, one is the way: cooperation, in order to minimize the influence of the extreme voices from wherever they come from.
It's worth remembering in this respect the Thessaloniki summit, Thessaloniki agenda, which set let's say, the agenda for the rest of the Balkans to enter the European Union. That was largely a Greek initiative.
And I should bring an example. The governing political parties of Greece do not flirt with the radicals, either the left or the right. Something that happens in Albania. We did not learn our lesson. And you mentioned the Greek initiative for the Balkan integration. The Greek presidency
integration into the European
of
Union.
EU, that is in 1914, that is next year, has one of its first priorities, again, the integration of Southeastern Europe. And it is very important now that Europe suffers this deep crisis and skepticism is being even more intense now from different sides, to have such voices in continuous, systematic support of the European perspective of our country and the region. So it is clear that the Albanian-Greek relations are very important, strategic, according to our estimation, not only for the two countries. They are very, very important for the stability in the broader region, prosperity and security. And this is the direction both leaderships should work systematically.
Going back to the situation in Greece, though, the prognosis is not good economically for the next few years. Greece is in deep recession. There is a danger that the Golden Dawn that we spoke about could gain more support. There have been attacks on immigrants, which has been very much reported, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch and other organizations. Is there a danger that Albanians themselves living in Greece could become more vulnerable to attack or conflict with some of the nationalists, Greek nationalists, and that this, whether the governments flirt with nationalism or not, could pull them into a bilateral dispute over this question?
I don't think that Albanians will be vulnerable under such situations. Most of Albanians, and it is more than 500,000 Albanians, are integrated in the Greek society to such a satisfactory level that it is difficult to divide them from the native Greeks. So I don't think there is such a danger. As far as the economic crisis is concerned, it is a fact that during the last 3 years, Greece lost 25% of its GDP.
Mm-hmm. No, this is massive. This is a great depression. Yeah.
1/4 in 3 years, 1/4 of its GDP. And the fact that now Greece is stabilizing, it will take more years in order to be in the right path. But the fact that it is stabilized shows that it has mature leadership, even in these difficult times. And we must be prepared here in Albania. I am very deeply concerned that the Greek and Italian phenomena will be present in our country after the elections of June the 23rd.
Which phenomena? You mean the economic?
The economic, first of all. Mm-hmm. You can hide the crisis for 3 days, 3 months, but you cannot hide it forever. And we are going to suffer it in all its dimensions after the elections of June the 23rd.
You mean a fiscal crisis in particular?
The fiscal crisis. Mm-hmm. And it is a pity that the two big parties that do have greater expertise than all us, the smaller ones, do not deal seriously with these problems. I'm sure that which the next government will be in our country will ask for the financial aid of the International Monetary Fund, something that we saw it happen in Greece, in Spain, in Ireland, in Portugal, lately in Cyprus, but at the same time in Romania, in Bulgaria. We are not going to avoid it. And we know that the financial aid from International Monetary Fund is accompanied with measures of austerity. And we must tell the truth to the people and not promise in a way that we never give the cost of the bill.
It's not a gift, it's a,
yes.
It's a promise of conditions.
Yes, and unfortunately, if we are not becoming serious in dealing with the economic problems of the country, we are going to suffer much worse situations than our neighbors live. And it is not so easy for us under the conditions, under the present conditions, to suffer crises of the nature it manifested itself in Greece, Italy and other countries.
Right. Before we come to the EU question, I want to ask you specifically about the costs and benefits of EU membership. Albanian-Greek relations, there's two other questions that come up every so often, this maritime dispute, your opinion, and secondly the Chameria question, which has become more prominent, I would say, in the past 2 or 3 years with a sizable population of Chams here in Albania who campaign for this question. What are your views on these two issues? Maritime question, Chameria question.
The delimitation of the maritime zones, the economic exclusive zones, I think was a fair agreement between the two countries. But it did not have a positive end. It was signed by the ex-ministers of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Basha and Ms. Bakoyannis, in the presence of the two prime ministers, that is, Berisha and Karamanlis. There was no objection from any side. It was, if I'm not mistaken, signed in the mid of April. It was discussed and voted in favor in the Parliamentary Commission of National Security. And the procedure stops somewhere there. Then we had the elections of 2009, and it was only after a couple of months after these elections that all the objections started from different sides, with the Socialist Party holding the flag. There are some questions that need answers. Why was that delayed reaction if there were really problems in that agreement? I think that the Socialist Party made the fatal mistake to misuse an issue of international affairs with a domestic policy. That is the worst advisor for a political party. The relations with neighbors are and must be considered with very deep respect. The other issue is they stimulated all the nationalistic rhetorics against that agreement. Every individual in the street, from the shoemaker to John the plumber, had an opinion of how that agreement would be. That's a pity. They accused high officials of the army, of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And after that, they sued the case in the Constitutional Court. I must repeat once again that the Constitutional Court voted under circumstances of a restricted sovereignty and integrity. I don't see any problem in that agreement. It was equal, fair, and it was in favor of the two countries. What Albania needs is close cooperation with neighbors, Italy and Greece, from equal positions, always, in order to profit by the natural resources existing in the broader area. But unfortunately, we had the negative result after the decision of the Constitutional Court, and it is and remains a very serious difficulty hampering the further developments in the relations of the two countries. Concerning the other question,
Chamariya question. Yeah.
I don't think that there exists such a question. The problem was first mentioned in the first visit of the Greek Prime Minister Konstantinos Mitsotakis in January 1991. He was the first leader, foreign leader, to visit Albania immediately after the fall of communism. His answer was clear and straightforward. Every Albanian citizen who feels wronged by the decisions of the Greek courts is welcomed to sue the case in our judicial system. And after that, go to the Tribunal of Human Rights in Strasbourg. This is the way. If 100, 1,000, or 10,000 American citizens do have a problem with the Canadian government, what do? Do they go to the courts, or do they found a political party in the United States of America in order to influence the foreign policy of United States against the Canada. So it is an Albanian unicality that works in no case in favor of Albania. This is the only way in our civilized society.
You wouldn't compare it to the situation, for example, between Slovenia and Italy over the Italian population in the Eastern Peninsula, or the German Sudeten, German Silesian population vis-à-vis Czechoslovakia and Poland? In
Yes,
other words,
it's a clear situation with the Sudets. You know that they addressed the case in the Tribunal of Human Rights in Strasbourg, and they lost the case. And you know the other aspect. The ex-president of Czech Republic did not sign the Lisbon Treaty, which replaced, in some way, failed the European Constitution, until all the leaders of EU accepted a footnote that the category of Sudets could not profit by the dispositions of that document concerning human rights. So we have the precedent in the Tribunal of Human Rights in Strasbourg. So it's clear that instead of creating problems, that's what they do, these parties. They try to create problems in the Albanian-Greek relations. And we must not forget, there is even another dimension. There are different politicians and different circles that are in favor of the revival of Ottomanism, a kind of neo-Ottomanism here in the country. Thanks God.
Autonomism and Ottomanism?
Ottomanism, neo-Ottomanism. And thanks God, they are very few and with very limited influence.
You mean going beyond Turkish soap operas?
Yeah, it is not only Turkey, it's a matter of mentality, it's a matter of philosophy, it's a matter of way of living, and so on and so forth. Albania and Albanians need nothing else than Europe and Europeanism.
Well, given the main hero in Albanian history, who was the major anti-Turkish Christian warrior Skanderbeg, I cannot see neo-Ottomanism as being ultimately successful here. This Cham question I think we'll come back to at some point. Maybe what I'd like to do is to, if you're willing, and I'll ask the Cham leaders to have some sort of discussion on my show about this question. Some of the issues that you raise and some of the issues that they raise. But let me, because we have limited time, go on to a last question, which is about EU membership. Is Albania ready for the EU?
No, we are
you
not
obviously
ready.
said not at the beginning. What needs to be done?
We are not ready.
What needs to be done?
European integration, rather than being everyday philosophy, political conception, political activity, social activity, it's only a slogan. They manipulate, they speculate, especially the two big parties. Europeanization of Albania is very concrete. And it starts from the very way the political parties function, the way they treat state, the way they treat government, the way they treat independent institutions in the country, the way they stand towards economy, social life, cultural life of the country. We want to be integrated in Europe without becoming Europeans. How can it be? Europeanization of Albania does not mean that we are going to have Europe in Germany, in France, Spain, or Greece, but to bring Europe here in our country. And unfortunately, the three main pillars of the European integration lack too much to be really authentic European. The rule of law, the competitive economy, and the social coherence. We are far from European realities.
The other side, very last question, is Europe worth joining?
Is Europe?
Is the European Union worth joining? In other words, given the crisis in Europe, given the fissures and fractures, given what Greece is going through in terms of the monetary union.
I think it's worth joining.
You think what?
It is worth joining. But on sound basis. What is the problem of all these countries? They joined EU, they joined Eurogroup without undertaking the necessary structural economic reforms. How can you enter a battlefield when you have against you a very qualified soldier if you have not undergone training before? You'll be a loser, for sure. That's the story of all these countries. And on the other hand, Europe has lost some of its substantial part of philosophy, that is solidarity. What I disagree with today's policies, especially of Germany, is that they did not express enough solidarity towards the southern members of EU. But Albania is a small country. Albania can learn from the mistakes of its neighbors, Greece, Italy, Cyprus, and all the other countries. On the other hand, it is very rich in natural resources. It has a very sound society. It has all these values, that is, religious harmony, inter-ethnic coexistence, and so on and so forth, that do generate energies in service of fulfilling the strategic goal of the country.
On that positive note, Vangjel Dule, thank you very much for joining me on the show, and I'm sure we'll have you back at some future date. Thank you.
With pleasure. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we have already come to the end of the show. I have greatly enjoyed being with you and with my colleagues here at Albanian Screen. Good night, everyone. Stay healthy, be productive, and remain optimistic. See you all very soon. Miropavshim.